this computer. Okay, now I'm recording. That means that other people can hear this as well if they want. So these are the, the spiritual stories, why we search for God, and then the rational proofs of God. And the ones we looked at last time were really just a fantastic discussion. And so I recorded it. And eventually I'll probably stick it up on a website, but right now it's just sitting in a Dropbox. But so if you want to hear it, just download it to your personal computer and then, and then go from there. So this is our topic today, spiritual proofs of the kingdom come. And here we talk mostly about prophecies today. And then the one that I'm really looking forward to is probably going to be next time we meet, or maybe the next several times we meet, where we get to talk about our spiritual teachers. I've got a lot to say there because I've had a lot of teachers, because I'm a slow learner and I needed a lot of but I've met Nine Hands of the Cause, and I've met Carrie Murphy, and I've met Klaus Longkilde, and I've met Robin and Bill. And so I have lots I can talk about. And so we can, that should be a lot of fun. And then the practice of becoming a Baha'i. I think we all have stories about that we could share. And then this one is fun. So that I've had some remarkable spiritual experiences in the faith that help me understand a lot of things. And that's probably true for you guys as well. So that's our step 6 here. And then pioneering and service. And I'm sure that there's a lot of things we could talk about there. And then everybody's favorite topic is spiritual challenges. So there's got to be some of those along the way, and I think we can learn from each other on that. And then commitments. So I've sort of rigged it so there's 9, one of the favored numbers of Baha'is, but it's really quite arbitrary, but that seems to me a nice little thing to go. So we're at step 3 is where we're at. And again, we'll talk mostly about prophecies. There are also guides to the times we're in. So for us, they're no longer about the future, they're about now. And also a lot of people use them as touchstones of truth. So they're good to talk about. For me, coming from a Christian background, it was really significant I had to understand the biblical sort of narrative and how the Baha'i faith related to it. So that's, greetings, Parsa. I see you down there. Hi, welcome. Thank you. So here's a chance where you guys can share if prophecies meant anything to you, or if there were anything that came, were a big deal. I do have a presentation that I can share. It's about 40 minutes, which sort of breaks all the rules that I sort of want for spiritual stories. But this should be the only time I would break that. And it's largely because I spent so much time trying to understand the prophecies that I can do that. But there's no sense for me hogging it all, and I can do as much or as little today as you guys like. And in fact, I don't have to do any of it. It can all be up to you. But does anyone want to share anything about sort of their prophetic gleanings of the faith?
I would like to share your book, which I have right here.
Yes. Oh, you're cheating.
Actually, I have a second copy. And yes, I have a third.
I was wondering where all the copies went. So.
Just got a copy too. Yeah, since the last meeting we had, we looked it up and got on eBay.
Oh, good. Well, I understand they're out of print.
Yeah, I have to go on eBay. I looked at Calumet. I looked all over. Yeah. I had to go to eBay to get it. We got it too.
Yeah, I've understood from the publisher that he's going to make them available sometime this winter. I don't through Amazon or something like that, but I don't know how. That's up to him. It's too late. So, do you want me to jump into it? Are you in for this torture? Or So I've improved since the last time, I hope, and so if you like, I'll just go forward. So my journey into prophecy, as I've told you, came when I bumped into the faith, and from my Christian background. I had a pretty serious but run-of-the-mill Christian background. I grew up in the South, and Christianity sort of in the water. And I didn't know there was any other religion. I had some vague understanding of Judaism, but really until I was certainly 10, 12, something like that, I really knew very little about other religions, but I was curious. And you know, curiosity killed the cat. So there I am. So it took me quite a while. The Baha'i faith's claims are very serious. And so I had to take a serious look at it. So I spent quite a number of years in pretty serious study. And I mean really serious study, especially of the Bible, but also of other religions as well. So as Carrie was sweet enough to point out, I've written several books on the topic. One is exclusively on prophecies. Another one, which is available in serialized version on Baha'i teachings, is really a set of, they're really essays on Christian-like topics, and I think some pretty interesting things in that. So if you ever wanted to, just go to BahaiTeachings.org and Google my name and you'll find that. There's about 60 articles there. And then there's about 20 of the third book that is on BahaiTeachings.org. So it's right here, you can see. So, oh, and there's the thing that Carrie just showed us. So you can't have that one, Carrie. That one's mine. So.
Well, I have three because I knew that someday they would be out of print, and I just wanted to make sure that that I and my descendants would have this wonderful work of scholarship.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you. You know, when I wrote it was, you know, the book that Baha'is often go to is Thief in the Night for looking at the scriptural things, and it's wonderfully written. But it's written with Bill Sears' wonderful personality all over it, which is sort of infectious and exciting. That's not so much my personality. I'm more scholastic and measured, but I needed a book like the one I wrote. So that's why I did it. So anyway, so common expectations of the return that I grew up understanding is that there was going to be wars and earthquakes, famines, and false prophets, and then the Bible says, but the end is not yet. So this is in Matthew, of course, and it's in the synoptic parallels. The synoptic books are Mark and Luke, not John. And so you can find parallels of all that. And then he will come on the clouds, and there's the biblical reference. The dead in Christ will rise first is something that I had understood. He'll come with angels. The sun and moon will be darkened, and the stars will fall from the sky. So that, for those of us of Christian background, Angela, you're Christian background, right?
Yes. I grew up as a Catholic, actually.
Yeah, so mine is not, my upbringing is probably not much different than yours. It was Episcopalian, but we knew about this stuff, but we never talked about it, was sort of the way that it sort of went in my upbringing. So that's why it took me so long to figure out. So the barriers to understanding the meaning is usually, these days, you either don't know the scripture or believe and trust in it. And there's certainly a lot of that. So a lot of in secular societies, they just, you know, that's it. Or you don't think the return can be missed. You believe in a literal interpretation and you're, you know, waiting for him to come on clouds. Or you don't think you can decipher the meaning. And I think that's true for a lot of Christians, especially if you've ever spent time in the book of Revelation. The truth is you can't decipher the meaning easily, at least from one side of the faith. But if you're on the other side of the faith, then it's much, much easier. And that's sort of what we're going to talk about today. So here are the keys. You know, there'll be wars, earthquakes, famines, false prophets. That one's easy. It just means that those things that are listed are they're things that occur over fairly large patches of time. You know, there's wars, there's earthquakes, there's famines. They're not daily occurrences. There's things that happen, you know, at greater intervals. And all it's really saying is that it's going to be a long time before the promised one comes. And so that one is pretty easy to figure out. He'll come on the clouds of heaven. That one's also pretty easy because clouds are what? They're dramatic, they may be stormy, and while his coming will be glorious, there's obstacles that may get in the way of recognizing it. So if you think about if someone were to come in the clouds, what would that mean? Well, he's in the clouds. It means it's going to be a little hard to see. So that was fairly easy once you see it. The dead in Christ will rise first. This one also is much easier than I anticipated. It just means that those who have passed on will see the appearance of the promised one before living Christians. I mean, that's the obvious, more or less literal sort of interpretation. Those that have died, those are dead Christians, if you will rise first. They'll see it, they'll know it, they'll get excited by it. So that's one interpretation. But also many non-believers will come to believe before living Christians. There's an alternative interpretation. And I think both of those, hold up equally well. And if any time you guys have questions or thoughts, feel free to chime in, let me know. He will come with angels. This one is interesting. If you go back, and back when I was starting my biblical searches, I had all sorts of study aids that I would gather. I had the literal Greek words that were in the translations that went from Greek to German to English. And then I had the Vulgate, which is the Latin version. And I would go back and look at varying original, but they're not original, by the way, the text, and look up the meaning. So if you look up the term for angel in the Old Testament, it's malach. I don't know how they would actually say it. It's like the Greek term and the English term, and they all mean messenger. So if you understand that he will come with messengers, is just what the word meant, it's a lot easier to understand. So the promised one will come with messengers who will deliver his message. So that's easy enough. These messengers are followers of the new religion, and they can be supported by heavenly hosts who can also assist with those who seek truth. So this is sort of the more spiritual component of it. So that's what you would expect from this. The moon will be darkened. This just means that our previous illuminaries, our heroes and guides, will be replaced if their message is not congruent with the new message. And that's been happening for a while, and it's continuing more rapidly. And I rather like this thing from our current days. That's some Confederate general over on the right. I don't know which one. And this is some guy that's removing it. That message is really not so consistent with our new world that we're in. And so that's the sun and the moon darkened, and the stars, literally the stars falling from the sky. And the sun and moon and being darkened is a little bit more dramatic because it sort of indicates sort of confusion and chaos and all the stuff that I think that we're seeing around us right now. So these are the common expectations of the return that we've just talked about. And it turns out that none of them are particularly hard to understand, and all of them have been fulfilled. So that was the easy part. So, but there's a whole lot more. And I should warn you, I'm aware because I lecture a lot, my voice will often give out. And so I've recruited some help. My wife tells me she can read. And so she's gonna help with some of the reading here about. So that should be fun. And then I may call on you guys to help me too on occasion so I can try to spare my voice. So you guys ready for the next chunk? Yes. I sort of broken it into chunks here, okay? So there's this wonderful prophecy of the thief in the night. You may not have known that it occurs over 30 times in the Bible. So therefore, it probably is worth paying attention to if you're interested in biblical sort of things. So, and there's a nice little reference for you if you like. And then there's the common version, but I think, actually, Nakwa, could you read that one for me?
Yeah, I'll try. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him.
Wonderful, thank you. So here's a good rhetorical sort of question to ask yourself, who knows if the thief, the promised one, has come? Those whom he took or those who are sleeping? So if the thief comes, who's going to know it? If you're asleep, you're not going to know it, because he's come in the night and he's taken what he wanted and he left. And so it's really such a powerful sort of prophecy. And it's also consistent with the prophecies you've already seen. You've seen about the obstacles, the clouds that can come with the understanding. You've also seen that it's easier for the dead in Christ to see him first than living Christians. And this prophecy also indicates that many Jews and Christians may miss, at least at first, the return. They'll never know the thief has come as long as they are sleeping. So that's sort of the thief in the night thing. And the fact that it occurs so many times is really an important observation. Any questions on that one? Any other thoughts? Okay, cool. So here's something also that the Bible tells us. If you look carefully, you'll see that the Bible actually talks about the thief may come 3 times before he's recognized. Oh, so there's 3 times. I have fun with graphics on occasions. Very good. All right. So, and the New Testament works pretty hard to show us this. And I think when you see how hard it works, you'll come to understand the significance of it. Nankwa, could you read that one for me?
Jesus to the scribes and Pharisees, no sign shall be given but the sign of Noah. The Son of Man will be hidden for 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish.
Okay. So there's the first 3-day and 3-night thing. Then this one is even more straightforward. It says, the Lord will come in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd watch of the night. Blessed are those who are awake. So this is amplifying and adding more detail to the thief in the night sort of theme. And then Jesus to his disciples at Gethsemane saying, stay awake and watch. But then Jesus came 3 times in the night, and each time he found them sleeping. So I think what many Christians have not understood about that is that's not just a story about him coming and that. It's a prophecy, and it's aligned with all the other prophecies about threes. And then again, before the rooster crows in the morning, the disciples will deny Jesus 3 times. So there it is again. Let's see. And then this very powerful prophecy of the king coming. The king is the one that comes at the end of time, and this is a prophecy that Jesus speaks about. And he sends out 3 sets of messengers to invite people to the feast, the wedding feast, when all the prophecies come true. And those messengers are ignored. And then the king is angry and he sends out retribution against them. But again, that same sort of passage. And then the kingdom of God is like a woman who puts 3 measures of leaven in until the whole is leavened. So there it is again, 3 things that will happen before some promised completion will happen. And then this one, that there will be 2 rains, then the harvest. So again, 3 major sets of events that will happen. And then finally, this one, destroy the temple of God, and in 3 days it will be raised up. And then this prophecy will actually take us some time to look at because it's such a significant prophecy. And so we'll come back to that in a minute. So the meaning of the threes is pretty easy for us once we understand what the Bible itself says about it. Jesus says, as long as he's in the world, he's the light of the world. And then when the light disappears, there's night. And so the meaning of the day and the night is right there. But if we're starting with Jesus as the first day, who were the second and the third? And so there's a question for us. And then what happens after the third day? Because there is no mention of a fourth, there's only a third. And it's apparently a day not followed by night. And so there we have that thing before us. So here we have sort of a timeline. Oh, let's go back here. So you have Jesus, day one, a night, a day two. We're still in mystery about this, a night, a day three, a night three, and then some big event that is happening here, which is really the event that we're looking for. So Baha'is are in the lucky position that we're on the other side of faith and we actually know the meaning. So recall that to the Jews, the first day missed was Jesus, and that was followed by a night. The second day was Muhammad, who brought Islam, followed by a night. And that, for many Christians, is very hard to understand, but it's not for over 1 billion Muslims. So that's worried. The third day was the Bab, the first of the twin prophets of the Baha'i faith, followed by a night. And then for those of us, you guys know, but you know what many people don't know about the Bab. And so I put this little thing about the power of that coming. And then the promised one shows up after that. So those really are the keys that make the rest of the interpretation that's still ahead of us so much easier. But the book of Revelation continues this theme of threes. The book of Revelation is all about sevens. There's 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 plagues. But if you look at each of those, each 7 is broken down into 4s and 3s. And it's those last 3s that are the ones that are going to be important to us. The last 3 in each set addresses in detail the events of Islam, the Babi, and Baha'i faith, the 3 days of God since Jesus. And here's where, to me, it gets, you know, all this could be sort of reasonably speculative up until this point. But if the book of Revelation starts supplying detail about what happens in these things, then it really changes the story quite significantly. So I can tell that I'll probably have, I'll need some help with reading in just a minute. So, and I'll let my wife off the hook. Then after the 7s run the course, the book of Revelation says stars fall and a new heaven and new earth is unrolled. And that, Baha'is think, is what's going on right now. So the most amazing prophecy, I think you'll understand, is really the one that starts back in the book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible. And it's particularly significant because it's the one specific prophecy that Jesus himself referenced when he's talking about the future. So the setting is this: the Jews are captive in Babylon. Their temple in Jerusalem has been destroyed, and thus they are in a state of desolation. The question arises, how long will this desolation last? And then Daniel has a series of visions in which he gets the answer. An angel appears and explains it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. But the question is, when does this 2,300 evenings and mornings start? And the answer shows up in the next chapter, in chapter 9. So to interpret chapter 9, you only need one tiny piece of information, that a biblical day is not the same. A day of God is not the same as a day for humans. Why would it be? And so you have to sort of figure out what this sort of thing is. And it turns out that in the Old Testament, a day of God is equal to a year in numerous places. And there's 3 references there. There's other places in the both Old and New Testament where a day has even a longer meaning, but these three are the ones that are relevant to this particular prophecy, and you'll see why in just a moment. So here's the prophecy, and maybe, can someone help me read this when it comes up? Maybe, hey, David, could you help me read this when it shows up? Yeah, okay. All right, so here it comes.
"70 sevens, 70 weeks equals 490 days, which equals 490 years.
Hey, I'll tell you what, I'll read the yellow part, you read the white part.
Okay.
Right.
So 70 sevens decreed for your people.
So the people would be the Jews in this case.
And your holy city.
Jerusalem.
To finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place."
Okay, so remember the setting. The Jews are in Babylon. They're in a state of desolation. They have this incredibly powerful narrative about being the chosen people, which they were, and about the future. And so they're wondering how long they'll be in trouble. And the angel comes and says to Daniel, that it'll take 70 weeks, right? But the 70 weeks we already know are going to be years, because a day of God is not like a day of man. So we okay on that so far? If not, you can raise your hand, because I can only see half of you right now. Okay, so let's push onward. And David, I'll need your help again.
"Know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem."
So that happened, the literal historic event when that happened was 457 BC by the command of Artaxerxes. I know Persians don't say that. Ehsan, I have no clue how Persians say that, but it's not Artaxerxes, that I know. So, all right.
"Until the anointed one."
So the anointed one literally means Christ. So there you go.
"The ruler comes. There will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens."
So there's 69 of the 70 weeks, which equals 483 years.
"It,"
Jerusalem,
"will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble."
So it's telling you what will happen in those future times. And Jerusalem was in fact rebuilt by that time, but it was under occupation during that time. So the prophecy is already ringing true.
"After the 62 sevens, the anointed one,"
which literally means Christ,
"will be put to death and will have nothing."
So after the 7 weeks, then the 62 weeks, which is the 69th week. After that, which would be the 70th week, and if you work out the math, that's the year 27 AD. The anointed one, which was Christ, I mean, that's why we call him Christ, because it means the anointed one, appeared and was in the middle of his work when he was put to death, which is exactly what the scripture says. So see how pretty amazing that is? Very, not that particularly hard to interpret. So let's push on. And if I could, David, if you're still able to help me, that would be great.
Yeah, I had a question about the previous one, Thomas.
Yeah, sure. Let's go back.
The math there were, so the ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. How does that symbology work out to be 69 of the 70 weeks?
It's just 62 and 7 is 69. You just add them together. That's what that is. So.
Okay.
And it's basically saying that the promised one will come in the 70th week, but he won't be able to finish his work. It'll be cut short. That's what it is. So, okay.
Okay. "The people of the ruler who will come."
That's the Romans in this case.
"Will destroy the city and the sanctuary."
which they did in 70 AD.
The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end. Recall the words of Jesus, that there would be wars and rumors of wars and desolations that have been decreed.
And that is till the end of the 2300 days or years. So you've got a prophecy that starts with 2300 years, let's just call them. And then you've got a prophecy that marks out what will happen in the beginning part of that, which is the 70 weeks, which is 490 years. So, okay. David, you able to help there? Oh, I can't hear you, David. Your mic is off.
Sorry. Okay. Let's try again here.
Okay.
He,
Christ,
will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7.
The 70th week.
In the middle of the 7.
3.5 years, which is the length of Jesus' ministry.
He will put an end to sacrifice and offering.
Through his sacrifice.
And at the temple he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him.
That is until the 2300 years have run their course. So the prophecy is saying is that, okay, you've got a certain amount of time to get your act together. The anointed one will come. His mission will be cut off, and therefore the rest of the desolations will unfold till the 2300 years is up. I mean, it's an amazing prophecy once you begin to see it. So here it is. You know the beginning point, and you know what happened after the 69.5 week. That's when Jesus was crucified, mid-mission. All we need to do is follow it till the 2300 years goes out, and then that's when the desolation will end. That works out mathematically to the year 1844, and that's the beginning of the Baha'i faith. So the thing that is even, being a good skeptic, I always wondered, is this just something the Baha'is are sort of making up? And it turns out that it's not, because there's a book called Daniel and the Book of Revelation. This particular book is about 600 some pages long, and I bumped across it when I was starting my research many years ago. And in it, there's this chart. The chart shows here is when the prophecy begins, 457 BC. And then in the middle, week 70, when Jesus came, shows up here. And then it goes to the 2300 years. And if you could read it, that little thing there says 1844. Only it's not when he would return, it's when he did return. If we have ears to hear is sort of the biblical way to say that. So, and here's a little thing here. I should put. It was a revelation to me back when I read Thief in the Night many years ago about 1844 and if it was a big thing or not. It turns out it was a huge thing in the Western world. And in fact, PBS did a special on it that I saw some years back and was called The Apocalypse. And all you have to do, it's a frontline special. You can go back and find it, I think, on YouTube or something, and watch it. And it shows what a powerful movement the expectation that Jesus would return in 1844 was. So I think that's, and it's pretty well done. So there's that. But there's more. The Bible not only told when the promised one would appear, it told how long the ministry of Muhammad would last. And that means, think about this, it means that the Bible foretold the dates of all three prophets of God, Jesus, Muhammad, and the Bab, that appeared before the appearance of Baha'u'llah. Mm-hmm. And it did that in great detail. So, how you guys doing? You want to see more?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Get on.
Okay, twist my arm. All right, let's go. All right. So the book of Revelation foretold this thing, and I'll need some help here. Hey, Carrie, could you read this thing for me?
Sure. The book of Revelation foretold that 2 prophet witnesses called olive trees and candlesticks standing before God would appear after Jesus clothed in sackcloth, warning the unrepentant.
So
Revelation
the Bible here is talking about things that would happen in the future. This is the book of Revelation. So it's after Jesus, the 2 prophets, and they refer to them as olive trees and candlesticks. The olive trees is actually significant because it's the same word that is used in the Quran for Muhammad. So that, and it's going to be something that's mournful. Remember, these are times of desolation. So there's sackcloth and for the unrepentant is there. Carrie, could you help me out for this too?
They would have the power to kill those who oppose them and smite the earth with all plagues for 1260 days. You already know that days equals years in prophecy, so 1260 days equals 1260 years. A beast would appear and make war against them, overcome and kill them. Like Jesus, these prophet witnesses would be overcome. And people of different nations would see their dead bodies 3.5 days and rejoice over them because these 2 prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. This is easy to interpret using our day for a year formula as 3.5 days equals 3.5 years, and this is 1260 days, which again equals 1260 years.
Okay. So there is a prophecy related clearly to something that would happen after Jesus. The 2 prophet witnesses that show up, referred to as olive trees and candlesticks standing before God, and the sort of power they'll have. And this in particular, the beast, well, I think I've got a slide that sort of does this. So this, Christians, and believe me, I've read gazillion interpretations of this, and people, Christians, understandably really struggle to understand what that means. We're on the other side of that because it's much easier. So the 2 prophet witnesses are Muhammad and Ali. They were met, as the verses declare, by a beast, those who violently opposed them and not only killed Ali, but eclipsed the spirit of Islam. And Ali is important in the prophecy because it identifies the branch of Islam from which the promised one would come. That's why he's in there. And people all over the world even now rejoice at the defeat of Islam because, in the words of the prophecy, these 2 prophets tormented them that dwell on earth. And I don't think you couldn't get much clearer. Nevertheless, their ministry was to last 1260 days, which are years in prophecy. And then the sort of pièce de résistance is to understand that the Muslim year 1260 is the Christian year 1844. So the Bible has supplied the dates for the coming of Christ, which you've seen, the coming of Muhammad and Ali, and the length of their ministry. Continuing, after the 1260 years, the book foretold that the 2 prophet witnesses would reappear in the promised day. Thus, the Bible foretold the appearance of the twin prophets of the Baha'i faith, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and has laid out in detail the appearance of Islam, what would happen and how long it would last before the promised ones appear. So, and there's more about the 2 prophets. You up for hearing more of that?
You betcha.
All right, let's push on. We're getting near the end and you're still alive. It's very good. Okay.
What do you mean? This is the greatest story ever told.
It is a great story. Very good. So the last 3 woes in the book of Revelation are judgments against humanity for ignoring God's prophets. That's been consistent since the Old Testament and all through our talk here today. The first woe was Muhammad, the second was the Bab, the third is Baha'u'llah. But note that the Bible indicates that the third woe comes quickly upon the second. The second woe is past, the Bab was executed. The third cometh quickly. And we know that Baha'u'llah's ministry begins 19 years after the Bab's. So it comes quickly, exactly as the book says. And then there's more about the two prophets. Note that it's not one prophet, but two that Christians are awaiting, one of which will be martyred like Christ. Here's a nice little quote. Looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearance of God and our Savior Jesus Christ. So Christians have ignored that word and one of its likely meaning, given what we know about the rest of prophecy. If you understand and look at the ministry of the Bab and see how close it is to paralleling the life of Jesus, including the martyrdom, you can see that there's waiting two things: an appearance of one like Christ and the glorious appearance of God, which is Baha'u'llah. The Bible even gives us the titles that the modern day prophets would have. God gave Ezekiel a vision in which a man appears to him to explain when the glory of God will return to the temple. So it says, afterwards, he brought me to the gate, which is the word for the Bab, and the gate which faces towards the east. The Bab was from Persia, which is, of course, east of Israel. And behold, the glory of God, which is Baha'u'llah, of Israel came from the way of the east. His voice was like the sound of many waters, and the earth shone with his glory. So this is a good chance for us to sort of review the precision of the prophecy. We started in 457 BC. We went ahead 2,300 years. That's when the desolation ends and the promised one appears. We went 69 and a half weeks, and what happened there was 31 AD. That's when Jesus was crucified, the first day ended. And then we show up 622, Muhammad and Ali appear, the beast opposes them, the second day is now ended. You go forward 1,260 years, and you wind up with the reappearance of the olive trees and the lampstands that show up before the throne of God. And then the Bab is killed on the third day, and Baha'u'llah remains to complete the mission. And then, so that's sort of a brief sort of sketch of what I've spent a good number of words talking about in Thy Kingdom Come, which is the book. But there's more that really distinguishes the faith. It's not just prophecy. It's really the fact that the faith was so incredibly open, that it was a revelation, not a philosophy, that it was explosive in growth, that it was written in the blood of martyrs, that it renewed an ancient moral code, that it was revolutionary in social principles, and is the reason progress is now being made. And in all ways, it was like the faith Jesus started, and it's here again. And then there's the boldness of the proclamations. And Klaus, dear, could you read this one for me?
Sure. Verily I say, this is the day in which mankind can behold the face and hear the voice of the promised one. The call of God has been raised, and the light of his countenance has been lifted up upon men. It behooveth every man to blot out the trace of every idle word from the tablet of his heart, and to gaze with an open and biased mind on the signs of his revelation, the proofs of his mission, and the tokens of his glory. Great indeed is this day. The allusions made to it in all the sacred scriptures as the day of God attest its greatness. The soul of every prophet of God, of every divine messenger, has thirsted for this wondrous day. All the diverse kindreds of the earth have, likewise, yearned to attain it. Baha'u'llah.
So it was words like these when I first encountered the Baha'i faith that really, once you hear them, you're trapped. If you're a Christian and sort of have some understanding, even a small understanding about the return, and then if we're lucky enough to know a little bit about prophecy, to look at this day of God illusion here. And remember how the prophecies talked about the day of God? Going back to the times, the Jews, to the times of Noah, that you'd be 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish before you would see the thing that you're yearning for. And so it's one consistent message, just over and over and over again. And it's incredibly powerful. And then there's the final biblical expectation that it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And there it is. That thing that we've waited for exists. And it not only exists, it's sitting right where Isaiah said it would, on Mount Carmel, which is overlooking the plain of Sharon. And there's a nice little biblical reference to it. So what all this means, at least to me, dear friends, is we're in a new spiritual reality. People may not realize, they may not be awake, they may not understand for whatever reason what they're in, but the nature of our reality, the spiritual universe in which we all live, is different now than it used to be. And then just a little bit, maybe, hey, Ehsan, are you able to read this for me?
Sure. Soon, Baha'u'llah's own words proclaim it. Will the present day order be rolled up, and the new one spread out in its stead? Verily, thou Lord speaketh the truth, and is the knower of the things unseen.
By myself, he solemnly asserts, the day is approaching when we will have rolled up the world in all that is therein, and spread out a new order in its stead. He verily is powerful over all things. Ehsan, can you help me with this one too?
Sure. The world's equilibrium, he explains, hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed.
The signs of impending convulsions and chaos, he warns the people of the world, can now be discerned, inasmuch as the prevailing order appeareth to be lamentably defective. And then here's a note that this doesn't just refer to Baha'is, nor are what we will do, but it's really part of the greater plan, and it's happening now. So we say those that are in the lesser plan of God have informed you of what's happening in the greater plan of God. The old stars are falling and new ones are being put out instead. And all of this is being powered by a new revelation from God that you can learn about. So, and then there's the principles of the faith, which of course we all know. And then I think this is the ending, and a good thing for us to chat about. It's strange to me, and I'll just stop this sharing and go here. It's interesting. I think so many people, and I think it's especially true in certain parts of the country, are not aware of prophecy, are not, and many of them have no spiritual foundations really at all. And yet, if the prophecies are true, it means that there's a spiritual story that's been guiding humanity all along, and that we're a part of it, and that once you see the story and know it, it has really profound implications. And somehow we're in the business of trying to wake people up and to see if we can do something about it. So what do you guys think?
Excellent presentation, Tom. I liked it very much. I have a question for you. Once I shared these prophecies with a Christian friend of mine. He was very skeptic. And he says, well, who's to say that you find a person or somebody fit into this prophecy and said, oh, I am the one, I'm going to start right at this time right here. And I'm going to say, I am the prophet of God. And I'll say that in 1844. And, oh, I am the prophet of God in 1863. And I am the one, because I'm going to fit right into that prophecy. I do not know if anybody else has heard that skeptic.
Oh, to me, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think we're supposed to be skeptical. But look at how the thing played out. For someone to claim in 1844 that, yeah, they're the promised one. And by the way, people have been claiming they're the promised one since the beginning of time, frankly. You can look in the first Christian histories. I mean, the first one by Eusebius lists probably 20 so-called people claiming to be the return of Christ. In my lifetime, there's been at least 4 or 5 that have made such claims. But it's the nature of the faith, the Baha'i faith in particular, that distinguishes it from anything else. The nature of the sacrifice, the power of the revelation, its public nature. It's so much like the ministry of Christ that for Christians it's really hard to ignore. They just have to be willing to look. So that's my thought.
Can I add one thing there, Tom?
Yeah.
One of the attributes of the Baha'i history is that Baha'u'llah was a prisoner, and all of his 40 years of banishment and exile were not under his control. He was sent from, obviously, the Taiseale to Baghdad, and then to Constantinople, Adrianople, and then Haifa. And of course, that's Akka. Of course, that's very important, because he didn't say, gee, I think I'll go fulfill these prophecies and become the promised one. I can do that. And there's so many other prophecies, of course, that Tom knows, that I'm sure has written about, that are very specific. The idea that he will come from the east unto the west, and Akka, the plain of Sharon. I mean, Carmel itself is mentioned. So Baha'u'llah didn't say it's now time for me to go to Carmel, and lay the foundation. And so knowing that history really helps us, I think, with skeptics, because that's inherent in the prophet, in the story of all these faiths, that he will come from the east to the west, and that he will suffer, but his rest will be glorious, the shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel. That even though the Muslims tried to throw his body over the wall so it would be eaten in Tabriz and we'd never hear from him again, that the history of even how the Bab got to Haifa and buried by Abdul Baha in that place at that time, it's not something that somebody decided to do, and that's our protection in terms of teaching, because it's all been taken care of. We don't have to sort of defend a charlatan prophet, of our faith, because he's in no way a charlatan. He's a prisoner of the Ottoman Empire, Persian and then Ottoman Empire.
Thank you, Kay. Very good. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Very good.
It's really pretty cool. It's as cool as 2300 from Daniel, so many centuries ago, and here we are.
Tom, we had a question. Hi, Tom. It's Candace, and my mom is visiting. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Sorry, neighbor's dog. We had a question about the 3.5 days, then it's 3.5 years. What do you do with that number?
Yeah, there's different ways to look at it, and I think, and I don't know which is the correct way. I know that Christians who have looked at this have sort of looked 3.5 years ahead of when Jesus was crucified and tried to figure out, try to look for something that may fit that time. There's nothing really good that fits that particular time. So there's the easier way to look at it is it refers to the ministry of Muhammad, because the 3.5 years is 1,260 days, which is the completion of that particular prophecy. So I think that's one way to look at it, and I've seen several others as well. But I think the basic line, there's another way too that comes to mind that has to do with, well, I'll skip that. It's a little too technical and arcane for our purposes here, but yeah, so that's my thoughts, Candace.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we weren't sure about what to do with the 3.5, but okay.
Yeah.
I understand. It equals 1,260 days.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't
So
do the
at
math.
1844.
And then where does the 1844 come to that? I'm sorry about the neighbor's dog. I'll mute.
No, it's okay. The 1844 is the end of the 2,300 days. And it also marks the time period from the 1260 years. 1260 of the Muslim calendar is the year 1844 in the Christian calendar. So it's sort of a double completion, if you will.
Is it the minus 2,300 minus 1?
Mathematically, do you get the 1844? I think you showed it, but we missed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
457 BC.
Yeah, it starts from 457 BC. There was actually 3 or 4 different edicts to restore the temple, but the one that was effectual was the one from 457 BC.
Okay, so you subtract that from the 2,300, you get 1844.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
I also have a question regarding the 3. So there was a mention that Baha'u'llah came 3 years after the Bab. So how is that 3 years? If you could explain a little, in a little more in detail how that is interpreted.
The only biblical thing that I relate to the thing is it says that the third woe cometh quickly upon the second, and there was 19 years from the beginning of the revelation of the Bab to the beginning of the proclamations of Baha'u'llah. So it was 19 years, not 3 years. And so that's all I know. There's some other little tiny reference in it. It goes back to something in Isaiah, I think, either Isaiah or Ezekiel, that you can correlate with the establishment of the house of justice. And I've seen that done before, but I don't remember what that particular one was. So.
Are you familiar with any prophecies that talk about the promised one coming from Persia, like the word Elam in the prophecy, and that he'll have a new name? Those are things I hear about here in the South, and I'm curious if you have any knowledge.
Well, the new name part is right on. I mean, it does say that. The Book of Revelation says that. The Elam part, I'm not positive about, but I can, Carrie, I have something, you'll enjoy that. You remember Jane Faley? Yeah, you remember the story of the professor and his camel driver?
Yeah.
You guys got time for a cute little story?
Sure.
Oh,
let me just say that it's in chapter 2 and 3 of the Book of Revelation. The new name
part. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually said twice in those one in those two.
Yeah. So Jane Faley was one of the best public speakers I've ever heard in my life. She was just amazing. And one of the things she said at the end of one of her talks is that she was telling this story about this learned professor who was a professor of mathematics and philosophy and astrology and astronomy and physics and just completely learned. But he had been traveling from place to place with his camel driver. And his camel driver had heard his talk for so many times that he said, look, professor, I think I can give your talk as well as you can because I've heard it so many times. So the professor said, well, yeah, let's give it a try. So the next time he went, the camel driver came up and he talked about mathematics and astronomy and religion and physics and just gave a beautiful talk, just like the professor. And then someone asked a question. And then the camel driver looked at him and he says, that question is so ridiculous, I'm going to let my camel driver answer it. So when I get stumped, I turn to Carrie, and so Carrie can help me out.
Carrie the camel driver.
Very good. All right. So guys, well, I've enjoyed, I don't know what we can do with all this. It's, you know, the time seems so secular and the time seemed dark, just like the Bible said it would, except to realize that we're part of a spiritual process that has long been foretold. And maybe it's not the detail that's important to share as much as the knowledge of what's really happening. So I don't know how much we have to talk about 2,300 days and 3 days and nights and stuff like that. But the spiritual reality itself is clearly important to, and I think connects with people. The sun is darkening and the moon is not giving its light and the stars are falling. Maybe that's the way. But
I couldn't help but notice the plague reference too.
I'm sorry, which
plague?
Plague, yeah, exactly. Yeah, wow, what a thought. Yeah, here we are in COVID times, and from all likelihood, this is the beginning of them. There's going to be more. So
there's a factoid that I want to share about Daniel. Daniel was his book was finished in 150 BC, and Daniel was a Jew, of course, but he was part of the Babylonian exile group. I guess his parents were. He's buried in Susa, Iran. He never came back to Israel. He died in Persia.
Wow.
And he's buried there.
Wow.
Maybe the Persians know about that. There's actually the tomb of Daniel in Susa, which used to be the capital of Persia.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. Such a good camel driver.
Isn't that cool, though? That he stayed in Persia. I love it.
Very good. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed it. It's I just love to stay and chat with you guys all night, and we can stay as long as you want. But I did want to say before, if people have to leave, I think the one next month should be a lot of fun because we'll talk about our spiritual teachers and stuff. And I have lots of stories. If we're good enough to get Carrie with us, I'm sure she has lots of stories, and Klaus and all the people that have been around for a while. Anything else we should talk about?
Can I ask because your presentation is so lovely, and I'm just wondering, is it possible to put it on YouTube like relatively soon so that the world can sort of know what we just saw?
Yeah.
Because what's going through my mind as I listen to it is, how can we find a way to say this to the world more often and a little bit louder?
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Yeah, I have a YouTube channel, and so I can put it on. It shouldn't be that hard to do. So I'll do that. I'll send you a link both to that should have multiple ways to reach it, and then if it's useful to you, then yeah, use it. That's sort of why we do these things. So
I have a question.
Yes.
Can I see your book one more time? I want to make sure that's the one I have.
Yeah. Actually,
yeah, that's the one I have. Yes.
Yeah.
I think the kingdom come.
Yeah.
Do not move it. Do not move it. Yeah.
That's it.
Kingdom come. Thank you. Yeah.
I love the artwork in it. The artwork, none of that stuff is copyrighted because it's too old. So we could use lots of it. And the publisher, I thought, did a really nice job at selecting the artwork. So it was really, really fun.
Okay. What was the name of the PBS program you mentioned about 1844?
Yeah, it's called Apocalypse.
Okay.
And I think it has an asterisk after it. So if you were to Google Frontline, Frontline is a series, a program of Frontline, and then put Apocalypse with an apostrophe. You should be able to find it. Something has happened here. Sorry, guys. Okay, so now I'm back. Good. Well, anything else we can chat about?
What I find in talking to Christians is that most Christians don't know anything about prophecy.
Yeah.
They aren't studying it in their Bible studies, their Sunday school. It's almost like it's I don't know, it's buried.
Yeah. And it would be true for me too, had I not bumped into the faith. And really, once you understand, it is a challenge for people to understand prophecy. Not only are the words different in different versions of the text, and you don't know which to do, and none of them were contemporaneous. I mean, they weren't, the Bible is, coming together many, many years after the time of Jesus. And then the Old Testament is even more clouded in its origin. But once you see the messages and can gloss over as distractions the part that are just a part of the inaccurate transmission of history, the story is pretty straightforward, and it's really not that hard to understand. But there's no reason to do that unless you're on the other side of faith.
Well, that's why I feel it's so important, because we are on the other side. We're the only ones who can present it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so for us not to do that just seems a bit foolish.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a missing point.
Question here.
I have a question. We cannot talk to a Christian that far because they are stuck to the Jesus is the Lord. When they say that, there is no continuation of, words, because in my experience,
yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys have other thoughts on this, and we've seen this many times before. That many Christians, their cup is full, right? They've found a prophet of God, and they're rather happy with it, and that's fine, except that there's about 100 prophecies in the New Testament that indicate that there's more to come, and so the early Baha'is especially were very good in dangerous times of sort of letting people know a little bit about what they believe, and then letting that sink in and not trying to be confrontational, but being suggestive. So I think being suggestive to Christian friends is really a useful thing. And then, you can say something simple like, well, yeah, so what about the prophecies? What do you think about them? Because literally there's about 100 of them, and so they must mean something, and we're in the lucky position as we actually know what they mean. So it's just a matter of being humble and somewhat knowledgeable, and maybe that can help. So
I think too that there's one place in Matthew, I think, and you correct me, where Christ in his own words he's asked, when will you return? Words to that effect. And he says, look to Daniel.
Mm-hmm. That's
right.
in
the Bible. Look to Daniel. And then you get into everything that we're talking about here.
Exactly.
So it's one of the few places that I've ever found where Jesus Christ himself tells people to do something when they ask, when will the time of your return be? He doesn't answer. He doesn't say, in 2,000 years. He says, look to Daniel.
Yeah.
And so that means that mankind is supposed to sort of take this journey that Tom has written about in a book that's already published. It's all there. But if we don't tell them that it actually says that in the Bible, their minister's not telling them that. So, I think someplace where Shoghi Effendi said that the Baha'is have to help teach the Christians their own faith also. And that's part of it, is to just that one passage should get them to go, well, I didn't know he said that, or can you show me where that is? And that's one of the places that all Baha'i should know exactly that verse and chapter, so that we can send them on this great journey and then help them through it. Most Christians don't know the Edict of Artaxerxes from a hole in the ground, and they never will, unless they are helped to become intrigued with the fact that Jesus did say it.
Yeah. And then the other thing that may, just tell them, look around. Do you think that the sun is not giving its light? The moon is turning dark. The stars are falling. I mean, look at the times we're in. Give them something to think about, because those are all things that Jesus foretold. And so we're in the lucky position of knowing what it means and where it will go. So find something small that connects with them and not too technical, and let them think about it for a while. So
there are some Christians who did crack the code and were expecting Christ to return in 1844, the Millerites. And the current denomination of Seventh-day Adventists traces their origins to that expectation, because they were in America and 1844 came and Christ didn't come in the clouds literally like they were expecting. They thought they had missed his coming, but of course he did come. Baha'u'llah did fulfill prophecy. So there is Christian history where Christians did figure it out. I think
when Christ didn't return here in upstate New York, where they were waiting for him, Miller said, and at first it was 1843 that he thought, and then, well, he didn't come, so, well, all right, let me go back, okay, 1844, and then even a little bit after that, and it just didn't happen. And so Miller said, I was just wrong. And Ellen White, who was also a fundamentalist part of that group, broke away from Miller. She tried to convince him that it could be interpreted a different way. It was Christ in the heavens, cleaning the sanctuary, preparing for his coming to earth stuff. And Miller said, no, I was just wrong. And it gives me a good feeling about Miller. Here's this man who really suffered for doing all this. He lost everything, really, but he didn't fudge it. He didn't say, well, yeah, I guess it's just a kind of a different interpretation. But Ellen White, of course, went on to found the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which it's a whole different thing in many ways from what Miller said. So I like to honor Miller because he's the one that figured this out and had the courage to call it, and then had the courage to walk away from it and said, no, I was just wrong. But of course he didn't know what was going on in Persia at the very same time.
Right.
So.
I think I'm going to go back to my camel now. So
just tell your camel to shut up.
Oh, very good. Oh, I love you guys. You're such a lovely crew. Well, here we are with a great mission and trying to figure out how to make sense of it all. But I think the times are they're very much, they've caught up to us. So we're watching it unfold in real time now, and it's going to get interesting. So,
well, all the more reason for us to put it on the internet in certainly the form that you've done, which is lovely. It's simple and it's clear, and but put a phone number or something, or you know, a way to respond for these people.
Very good. I'll see what I can do. So,
Okay.
okay, guys. Well, I think I'll leave you. Any other questions before we go?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Good night,
Great,
everybody.
Tom.
Really
great.
All right. See you next time.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Tom.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.